Hey, everyone. It's me. And yes, this is another video about Perseus, but it's a fascinating story and there's still lots more to explore. So stick with me. Now, in all my previous videos on Perseus, I've portrayed him as a hero who slays monsters, rescues maidens, and does all the usual heroic stuff. But what if I told you he was actually a villain? Now don't get your hopes up too much. He isn't exactly Darth Vader or Hannibal Lecter. He just has a bit of an attitude problem. This new facet of his character is revealed in a vase painting known as the François vase after its discoverer, the French painter and archaeologist François Rosier. It dates back to around 500 BCE and depicts scenes from the myth of Perseus. You can find it today in the J. Paul Getty Museum in Malibu, California. The scene we're going to focus on is this one here. As you can see, Perseus is wrestling with Andromeda, who is tied up and struggling to free herself from his grasp. Now, Andromeda is usually portrayed as Perseus's love interest, and that's probably how this painting was meant to be. But there's a problem with that interpretation. We know from other sources that Perseus and Andromeda were not just lovers, they were uncle and niece. Yeah, that doesn't sound right, does it? Let me explain. You see, in some versions of the myth, Perseus's grandfather, King Acrisius of Argos, had two sons, one of whom was named Phineus. Now, when Perseus slew Medusa, which you can watch in my video linked below, he returned to Argos expecting to be welcomed as a hero. But Acrisius refused to let him come to rest because he had murdered Phineus. That's right. In some tellings of the tale, Phineus wasn't killed by Poseidon, but by Perseus. I suppose he got tired of babysitting his brother's kid. So when Perseus showed up at the palace, all Acrisius did was yell at him, "You killed my son, get out of here before I have you put to death." Perseus took this to mean that he could never live in Argos in peace, so he left and eventually ended up in the city of Saphigia. There, he met a woman named Cassiopeia, who was the daughter of the king and fell madly in love with her. They got married and lived happily ever after. The end. Okay, maybe not so happily ever after because Cassiopeia had a little sister named Andromeda. And as we know, Perseus had a bit of a monster problem. Andromeda, being the good little sister that she was, volunteered to sacrifice herself to a sea monster to save her father from death. But then Perseus came along, slew the monster and rescued her. And since no one else was around to claim her hand in marriage, she became the prize of our hero. And that's where the vase painting comes in. And yeah, that is totally creepy. Why? Because Andromeda was only 12 years old when she was sacrificed and Perseus was like 20. Yeah, their age gap is so big that if they ever had kids, the oldest would have been older than their grandfather at the time he was killed. That's just gross. But it gets worse. This painting isn't the only depiction of Perseus and Andromeda where he looks like he wants to devour her whole. There are others. And I think it's just safe to say that whoever painted them had some pretty messed up things in mind. Of course, we can't ignore the possibility that Perseus was just a jerk who didn't know how to treat women. But it's just also possible that these artists were actually depicting something that happened in the original myths that have been lost to time. If that's true, Perseus may have been a lot more villain than we gave him credit for. So what do you think? Was Perseus a hero or a villain? And what do you want to see next? Please let me know in the comments section. And don't forget to subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks for watching. Bye. Long ago, the hero Perseus embarked on a dangerous quest to slay the fearsome Gorgon, Medusa. Armed with gifts from the gods, Hermes' winged sandals, Athena's mirrored shield and Hades' helm of darkness, he ventured into the lair of the monstrous sisters. As he approached Medusa, a strange feeling came over him. His hand trembled, not with fear, but with doubt. For in the flickering lamplight, as he gazed at the grotesque yet mesmerizing visage of the monster before him, he realized that it was not a mindless beast he faced, but a woman. A woman who had been cursed by the gods, punished for the crimes of another. Her serpentine locks were a tangled mess, a symbol of her pain and torment. Her wings, once symbols of freedom, were now clipped, pinning her to the ground like a fallen angel. And her eyes, oh, those eyes that had turned men to stone with a single glance were now dull with despair. Perseus stood transfixed, his mirrored shield reflecting not the hideous Gorgon, but her anguished form, a mere mortal woman trapped in a horrifying prison of her own making. In that moment, the hero's resolve wavered. Was this the monster he was meant to slay? Was this the glory he had been promised? Or was there more to this creature than met the eye? He remembered the tales he had heard, whispers of a time when Medusa had been human, when she had walked among mortals as a beautiful priestess of the goddess Athena. How the goddess had betrayed her trust, how Poseidon had violated her sanctuary, and how Athena, in a fit of rage, had transformed the innocent maiden into a hideous monster. And then Perseus saw it, a flicker of humanity in Medusa's eyes, a plea for mercy, a whisper of the woman she once was. And he knew in that moment that he could not slay her. He could not be the instrument of Athena's wrath. With a newfound determination, he removed his helmet, his voice echoing in the silent cavern. Medusa, I see the curse you bear, and I seek no glory in your suffering. Help me save the one I love, and I will find a way to lift your curse. Medusa's head snapped towards him, her eyes blazing with surprise. Could she trust him? After all, heroes were supposed to slay her, wasn't that what they all came for? But something in Perseus's voice, his tone of sincerity, the kindness in his eyes, made her hesitate. Could this hero, this slayer of monsters, really offer her more than just death? Perhaps. With a sigh that seemed to release centuries of pain, Medusa lowered her head. Very well, Perseus. I accept your bargain. But know this, if you break your word, if you do not find a way to lift my curse, I will haunt you for eternity. And so an unlikely alliance was formed between the hero Perseus and the Gorgon Medusa. Together, they flew through the starlit skies, bound for the coast of Ethiopia, where Andromeda awaited, chained to the rock as a sacrifice to the sea monster Cetus. When Cetus rose from the depths of the ocean, its enormous form blocking the sun and sending the townspeople fleeing in terror, Medusa stepped forward. Her eyes flashed, and with a single glance, turned the sea monster to stone. It froze mid-roar, crashing down into the sea and becoming a towering statue that no mortal could move. The people of Ethiopia were astonished. They had seen the mighty deeds of Perseus before, but to see the Gorgon, the scourge of monsters, standing as his ally, that was a sight that filled them with awe and wonder. Andromeda was freed, and Perseus kept his promise. Together, they sought out Athena, the goddess who had cursed Medusa. And there, in the heart of the goddess's temple, Perseus pleaded on Medusa's behalf, recounting her bravery and selflessness, how she had laid down her life for the sake of others. Athena, the virgin goddess, listened impassively, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice echoing with divine power. Very well, Medusa. I offer you a choice. Your curse is great, but your atonement is greater still. Do you wish to remain as a Gorgon, feared and reviled, or do you wish to have your sight restored and live out the remainder of your days in obscurity? Medusa looked at Perseus, then back at Athena. I choose neither, she said, her voice ringing with newfound strength. I am content to be what I am, a symbol of terror to the wicked and a reminder to the gods that even in their greatest acts of cruelty, there is always hope for redemption. And so Athena bestowed upon Medusa a final gift. Her cursed gaze, which had turned men to stone, was transformed into a blessing. Now, with a single touch, Medusa could heal the sick and wounded, turning their pain to ash and sorrow to joy. No longer a mindless monster, Medusa became a guardian of women, a protector of the oppressed, her story a cautionary tale of cruelty and the power of forgiveness. Perseus, Medusa and Andromeda forged a bond that would echo through the ages. Their tale a testament to the power of compassion and the courage to choose a different path. Welcome back, everyone. Andromeda was the most beautiful woman in all of Greece. In fact, she was so breathtaking that the gods took notice of her. And you know what they say about the gods and their gifts? Well, in this case, the gift was a prophecy that on her wedding night, she would be devoured by a sea monster. Yikes. To avoid this fate, her father, King Perseus, chained her to a rock by the seashore and made plans to sacrifice her to the monster. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind a bit. The story starts with Perseus, who was also considered quite a looker, though for a different reason. He was the son of Zeus, conceived when Zeus, in the form of a swan, seduced the mortal Danae. Perseus had quite an interesting childhood. For instance, he grew up believing that his grandfather, King Acrisius, was actually his father. See, Perseus's real dad, Zeus, wanted to keep his and Danae's relationship a secret. So he placed them in a chest and sent it floating away on the ocean. It washed up on the shores of Seriphos, where it was discovered by King Polydectes, who then raised young Perseus as his own. Now, fast forward a bit and Perseus is all grown up, slaying monsters and generally being a badass. One day, he visits the Oracle of Neith to ask how he might get revenge on a king who had wronged him. The Oracle, however, tells him about this other king, his grandfather, Acrisius, and how he lives over in Argos. She advises Perseus to go visit him. But I think we can safely assume that wasn't the only thing on Perseus' mind, because soon after, he set sail for Argos and happened upon the lovely Andromeda chained to a nearby rock. Turns out King Perseus was hoping Perseus would slay the sea monster that was sent to devour Andromeda, and then in gratitude, Perseus would marry Andromeda. Now, while Perseus was usually happy to help people out, in this case, he was pretty annoyed at the king for setting him up like this. So annoyed, in fact, that he just left Andromeda there to die. Fortunately, however, another hero named Theseus arrived soon after and freed her from her chains. Together, the two sailed away to a nearby island. Meanwhile, back in Seriphos, Perseus told everyone he'd freed Andromeda from a monster, but left out the part about how she was slated to marry him. Naturally, Polydectes was furious and vowed to kill Perseus. As punishment, Perseus turned his stepfather into stone with the very same Medusa head that had started all this. Then he went to go find Andromeda only to discover that she had already been taken by Theseus. Now, despite the fact that Perseus had saved Andromeda from a horrible fate, she didn't exactly greet him with open arms, probably because Theseus was her fiancé and all. But Perseus was persistent and eventually won her over, even though he may have used some underhanded tactics to get her to change her mind. Some stories say that he actually showed her the severed head of Medusa, which granted its possessor powers over the dead, and threatened her with it. Others claim he just threatened to resurrect Medusa and let her devour Theseus. Regardless, Andromeda eventually agreed to ditch Theseus and be with Perseus instead. And now I can hear you asking, what happened to Medusa? Well, since Perseus had saved Andromeda from the monster, he figured she should be the one to name its fate. So he brought her to the Oracle of Delphi to hear what the gods had in store for Medusa. Would you believe the oracle told her that Medusa was destined to become a great queen? Clearly not the fate Perseus had in mind, but hey, who are we to question the whims of the gods? So Perseus did the next best thing and married Medusa. And yes, I know it sounds crazy that he married the Gorgon, but I promise it's not as bad as it seems. You see, when Medusa was resurrected, she became a fierce warrior, but also incredibly compassionate. She used her powers to help others and developed a close bond with both Perseus and Andromeda, a bond that would echo through the ages. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this special edition monster mashup. If you want to learn more about these amazing creatures, check out the links in the description below.